Hey, Aaron here again. So, for this one, I wanted to make it a little bit different. This one is going to be kind of a start of a smaller kind of off series of videos. I'm going to be naming this one, well, probably like learning from the Ar-15 or something like that, but um, basically what this is just showing a few of the things that the Ar-15 has taught me that I didn't really catch in the videos, because I watch a lot of videos on how to put these things together to make sure I'm doing it right and read instruction manuals and stuff, and there's just some things that aren't covered, and I kind of wanted to go over those. So, um, one of the first things I've learned about the rifle is it is spring loaded. Um, and I'll explain that. Um, Basically, if I had to give one piece of advice to someone working on an AR-15, treat every part of the rifle as if it was going to basically fly out of the gun and whack you in the face. Use caution when working with these things. If you don't have a pair of glasses, I advise getting some ballistic goggles. I haven't been whacked with anything in the face so far, but it is possible. I've had several things fly out of this rifle that weren't intentional. Majority of the stuff that can fly out of the rifle is, of course, the internal components. So I kind of wanted to go over those with you. First one that I almost had hit me in the face is right here. The dust cover. If you get a upper receiver that already has the dust cover installed on it, great. If you're like me and like doing everything yourself, then you asked for a stripped upper which does not have the dust cover or the forward assist. The dust cover, if you do not have it properly installed and you're trying to get, or when you're trying to get this thing on, if you don't have it properly held down when you're trying to install it, the little tiny spring down there, which I don't know if you can really see, but there's a little spring down there, and yes, I'm going to be getting a better camera eventually. The spring that holds that in place, if you do not put this pin in properly with it properly held down, that can fly out of there and you can end up losing that. So that's one of the things to watch for. Next thing on there is the rear detent spring. I think I talked about this in my build number 8 video, but basically watch this little spring here. Right here is the rear takedown pin, and there's a small detent that sits about right there, and then a spring that sits right there. That spring is very fragile. Same spring that sits up here. You can kind of see it through this little hole right here. But if you're going with an A2 style stock, or even the A3 style collapsible ones, make sure you use caution when working with that. Because if you see the thing, you're trying to push this little thing in, or push the stock in, and that spring is sitting off at an angle, you will crush or break that spring. Also, it does have a small tendency to fly out. Not as much as other parts, though. Another thing that has a possibility of flying out is your trigger grouping. Let me get this broken down here. Why is that not moving? Okay, technical difficulties. One moment. Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay. So, figured out when I opened or pulled the bolt back to open the dust cover, when I pushed it forward, it did not actually move the bolt back forward all the way. It was sitting partially back, so that's why I couldn't open it. So I could have used the forward assist, however I just pulled the thing back and let it snap. But the trigger grouping. Down here when you're installing, unless you have something like a Geisel or a Timney trigger, which are just drop-ins, you do have several springs in here which have the potential of flying out if not properly held down. Now those are fairly easy to work with because it's a fairly accessible part of the rifle. The one that I actually ran into today that flew out of the rifle, which is to me quite an amusing story, is down in the back of the rifle. If I can get this thing to hold still. Don't know how well you can see that, but that little pin down there, you can kind of see it sticking up. See if I can get this thing in a better angle. Don't exactly have a workbench or a vise, but pencil. That little piece right there, that is actually spring-loaded. The only, and I repeat, only thing holding that in is this rear buffer tube. And when I was pulling off the Magpul one, which came with its own rifle length buffer tube, designed for A2 style stocks, I broke it loose with my handy dandy Ar-15 multi-tool, pardon me, and then started unscrewing it. Fortunately, I was holding it away from my face, however, it did end up flying out of there, because as soon as I started unscrewing this, I forgot that that was the only thing holding that in, and that little pin and the spring ended up way the hell over there. So you do want to watch for that. Also, this this buffer spring in here, when I first got this thing, I was kind of drugged up on some stuff from the dentist, so I guess I can't really be blamed that much for it, but I was also in the dark room, drugged up from stuff from the dentist, playing with weapon parts. That's smart, right? When I first got the stock, it came in a box that had the stock, buffer tube, buffer, and buffer spring all in one thing. And it had, there it is, that little yellow cap there. See if I can, there it is. That little yellow cap there was just popped onto the top of this. Well, I didn't realize that it had instructions written on the top of the cap which say to use caution when pulling it off there. Well, I did not use caution when pulling it off there and ended up having to go chase down the buffer and buffer spring because they shot out of the buffer tube. So, couple of things, those are a couple of things I've learned from working with the Ar-15. Another thing is weight. You always want to use something that is going to have weight when doing any kind of work on the rifle that requires impacts. This trigger guard down here, you'll notice the head of this pin is horribly mushroomed out. It still works, but it is just horrifically mushroomed out. That's because I didn't have anything to clamp it down with, and I was using inadequate tools to try and get it in there, so it ended up destroying the head of that pin. I had a similar experience with this, not quite as bad. That pin right there that holds in the forward assist, however, it was not quite, again, as bad because I learned a little bit. Now the one in here, you notice this one, the very last one I did, has the least damage to it. That's because I figured out that if you hold the thing stable, find somewhere where you can get the thing where it's not going to move, it's not going to vibrate, you know, like a solid, the floor, concrete, whatever you can find. Preferably if you put on concrete, I'd advise putting something soft under it, like a little bit of carpet. But anything solid where you can put it and you want something that has weight to it. Whacking it with the end of that does not work. That is why that is so mushroomed out. It's because it got repeatedly whacked with that. I used a hammer and a screwdriver to do that one. And that one actually turned out really well. because, again, I did not use something really light. I used something that had some weight to it. So as you can see, my learning curve went from horribly mashed to kind of sort of mashed to not really mashed. And that was as I learned to get it somewhere stable where it's not going to be moving around. Something solid that's going to hold up to being whacked, and using something actually heavy like a hammer to hit it. So that was another thing that I've learned from the Ar-15. Also, tools are required. The handguard that I had on there before the handguard that I had on there before, I figured out that that was actually not in place, and if I'd have fired that thing, it'd have probably rattled it loose and ended up doing some damage to the gun, because I did not have the proper tools to tighten it. Now that I have an actual tool designed for tightening it, I can go back, and when I do my hunting rifle build, I can properly torque the thing in place and tighten it. So just working without tools is not advisable. If you are planning on working on an Ar-15, building one, save yourself a lot of heartache, a lot of trouble, a lot of pain, and get yourself one of these. If you only buy one single tool for your entire Ar-15, buy a damn multi-tool. These things are incredibly helpful, and you can cause damage to yourself and your rifle by not doing it right. So that would be my advice there. The only other things I've really learned from the rifle is just be precise. You know, if it's